Hello, I'm Tom McPhail. I'm a professor of media studies and a fellow in the Center for International Research at the University of Missouri in St. Louis. Prior to this, I taught in Canada. I had the good fortune of working with Marshall McLuhan. I also had the good fortune of working with Everett Rogers and some other major researchers in terms of modernization, opinion leadership, and what happens with the media in a third world context. And now I'm going to describe to you what is going to be a major new addition to the literature and reflects the paradigm shift that will be underway in the next few years. I'd like to discuss a growing area of concern which is called development communication. Development communication basically deals with what the Western or the industrialized countries are doing in terms of the Southern Hemisphere or less developed countries. And it's reached a crucial point, and I describe this crucial point in a new book called Development Communication. The point of it is that basically modernization theory and modernization projects and attempts have basically failed. The third world today is worse off than it was after World War II. Yet after World War II, under President Truman, in his inaugural address, he made a huge commitment for the United States to try to economically assist the less wealthy nations. Now, part of the motivation was clearly to counter communism and communist inroads in these same nations. Therefore, in the 1950s and 60s and even the 70s, a great deal of money in foreign aid was poured into these third world countries, many of them by projects led either by American foundations or American universities. Yet, over time, these projects failed to materialize in terms of providing either economic success or social or cultural success. And in fact, in some cases, on the social and cultural side, things got worse. And so here we are today in a situation where the literacy rate is higher in the third world than it was after World War II. Many people are poorer today than they were after World War II. Good example, maybe in Latin America, Africa, or Asia, some farmer might have had 3 goats. Today he's got 1 goat. So even on that sort of very rough scale, things are moving in the wrong direction. Therefore, we have to look at how can we change the approach to the third world when we talk about development communication. How can we assist the third world so that they design the projects, they participate, that it is a bottom-up movement, not the top-down, not bureaucrats in Washington or egghead academics from the Ivy League schools or the California schools or the Big Ten. So we've come to a crossroads where we must turn upside down how things are done in terms of applying literacy training, radio for social change, television for social change, and other communication strategies, including the internet, to assist people in the third world to aid themselves. So they define the projects are done in their language, and their culture is not diminished. What happened earlier was basically people in the third world were told you've got to abandon your old cultural ways and you've got to do things like Americans are doing it. That you've got to adopt a sort of American culture, and it sure would help if you spoke English. So therefore their languages were marginalized and their cultures were marginalized, or they were treated as trinkets or indeed in some literature savages. So we've come then to this major crossroads, and I think that over the next few years, the United Nations, particularly UNDP, UNESCO, the ITU, are going to have to change their ways in terms of development. The U.S. Secretary of State is going to have to change the mentality within that large department in terms of aid efforts. And American foundations are going to have to stop dictating to the third world what needs to be done. Rather, the foundations have to provide a framework to assist the third world people in having third world people define and work on projects rather than being treated solely as subjects in order that someone gain data for a PhD dissertation at some prestigious American university. So anyhow, it's going to be an interesting few years, but clearly there has to be a major paradigm shift for the third world to succeed. And we are not talking solely about economic success any longer, but we're talking about social success, success in healthcare, success in terms of language and culture, and particularly literacy for young boys and girls.